The following opinions expressed in this program are that of Noah Waterman and do not reflect those of any other
Guys, that can't be right. Can we try that again?
The following opinions expressed in this program are that of Noah Waterman, his guests, his parents, your uncle, your auntie, your fourth grade teacher, that guy that brings his iguana to the park, the state of Mississippi, the Brian Setzer Orchestra, 3 babies in a trench coat, you, yes, you, in the red and blue striped polo. This is the best game of all time.
'Tis the season of costumes, dressing up, looking like a fool, acting like a fool, but most importantly, of the best game of all time. Ooh, that is right, guys. We are back again with another episode just for you, the people who are looking for more and more excuses to deep dive and go into petty differences between games in the way only we know how. I'm your host, your humble boss, Monster Noah Waterman. Of course, here with another episode now. This should be interesting. You know, going from the last episode where we hit on these sort of one-hit wonders to really what is essentially also one-hit wonders, right? Like, these games have not had a sequel, but they have been big hits. And I think the nature of these two games we're talking about today, of Balatro and Vampire Survivors, they don't feel as stingy and as money grubby as your common mobile game, but to call them like a console game feels wrong. They both feel like mobile games. They feel at home as mobile games. They really tread that line. And I think if more mobile games tread this line in the same way, the term mobile game wouldn't have so much of a negative connotation. Or better yet, we wouldn't feel crappy about the idea of paying, $3, $5, $10 for a mobile game. Because the truth is, there's so much schlock out there for mobile that are just excuses to get ads, or worse, the ads themselves are just so bad that it takes a couple of heroes to rise through the ranks. And that's kind of how I view of games like Vampire Survivors and Balatro. Now, that is not to take away from other mobile games. My wife's a big fan of Royal Match, and while those ads are awful, and I do give her shit for it, mostly because she's my wife and it's fun. If those are the things that you enjoy, you should play them, absolutely. But those seem to be exceptions to the rule. And rules are what separate us from the animals, which is why there are so many rules on this show, on this podcast, on the best game of all time. Because when we work within the rules, then we know not just what rules we can break, but why we can break them. Ooh. I think that's a big thing that both these games have in common. The idea that they set up rules, and then when they do break them, they mean something because the rules were there in the first place. Right? It makes you it makes you think a little bit about that. So we will get into that. We will get into the whole conversation with the crew. Let's dive in to the next episode of the best game of all time, Balatro versus Vampire Survivors.
For Patrick's hospitality, I got him a 7-Eleven hot mango flavored honey bun.
Hot mango?
And they have their own line of like Gatorade, like electrolyte and vitamin flavored drink, and they have a caramel apple flavored one.
Oh God.
None of that sounds good.
So
also, do those flavors go together? Like if you're chasing hot mango honey bun with caramel apple drink, how's that mixing up in your system?
What's even the hot in this?
Well, so I was just going to ask because normally it'd be pretty obvious, but because it's 7-Eleven, I have to ask: hot as in spicy or hot as in warm?
Spicy.
Well, I assume it has to be spicy because unless it can't just be hot out of the
again,
package.
Any other company, I would assume so.
Like
But this
one
thing
of
could be
those
sitting.
things where you like snap it and it suddenly self-heats. I don't like that.
Well,
it sounded bad.
Podcast.
Oh no.
Well, hopefully you like that worse than you liked either of these two games, because friends and folks, welcome to the best game of all time, the only podcast that
What a
dares to
segue.
do the imperceptible, the impalpable, nay, dare I say, the impractical task of reviewing, rating, and ranking every game ever made. A task that we may never successfully complete, but we'll always give it one more run. And on this roguelike adventure, we still have all the scores we've given out before, but before we begin a new round, I have to whip out the 3 weapons I picked up over the subsequent podcasts. Louis Pugnalia Thomas, Patrick Clerici Beloy, and Michael Space Dude Petrocelli. Guys, how are you doing?
I would have preferred Michael Balatrocelli, but that's just my own preference.
I felt like with all the characters in Vampire Survivors, your last name is the only one that sounds like it could be a character in Vampire Survivors, so I had to
That
give you
is
something
fair.
different.
That's legit. That's legit.
What if the world ends and then we still survive? We might be able to catch up and rank every single video game. So
Honestly, if we could just kill the gaming industry now so they stop
Yeah.
making any new games whatsoever, that really buys us at least a couple good years.
I agree. And maybe that's what we have to hope for.
Well, with that, I'm excited because we have picked 2 recent games that are nothing like any other games we've had on the list so far. These 2 games had taken the world by storm to the point where I was going to random weddings and family events, and both these games actually came up in casual conversations with people I had never met before. They just somehow found their way into the modern zeitgeist. This month, we have picked up and not been able to put down Balatro and Vampire Survivors. 2 games that I thought would be easier to squeeze into my schedule than they actually were. But more on that later, as first, we have to get into our first segment, Get to Know Your Panel. Get to Know Your Panel is a segment where you get to know a little more about the people you will be stuck listening to over the course of this episode. It could be a question for one of you or a question for the whole group. This is a question for Patrick. Now, I know, switching it up. I'm going back to the start on this one because I do need to ask. You have once said before that you absolutely hate the idea of Medusa heads flying everywhere. I need to ask, will Vampire Survivors be dropped in score because of this?
It was no, it won't. I mean, well, you know what? Maybe I'll drop it a 0.1 or something like that. But no, because you can actually fucking aim at them, unlike Castlevania.
You
where-
actually can't aim at them. Like the whole point of Vampire Survivors is you can't aim. You just kind of shoot.
I'm a knife guy first, so you know the directional aiming is really it's key. So but
To be
yeah,
fair, it's
all
also
right.
not a platformer, so
Yes.
the Medusa heads aren't knocking you into a pit.
Castlevania. Anyway, no, I'll subtract a 0.01 off of whatever score I was going to give it for the Medusa heads.
Okay,
To
you
be
want
fair
us to?
my yeah.
Do we do that in post, or will you remember to do that when it's time to?
I'll
to vote?
remember. I got it.
Okay,
It's long.
good.
My brain's not rotted from playing these games.
With that, I guess let's start before we get into the games individually, because I feel like these aren't going to be fast to talk about, but it's going to feel different to talk about these because you don't need to play a lot of either to get a sense of how the game works. However, it is very hard to not play a lot of either. Are there, what is it about these 2 games that drew you in and made you not be able to stop playing, if any?
Vampire Survivors, I think I first heard about on Get Played, the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about how addicting it was then. And then Petro talked about it to me and
Yes.
talked about how addicting it was, and even maybe recommended that I not get it because
I
of
essentially
how
recreated that scene from Walk Hard, if you've seen that movie, where he walks into the room where they're smoking weed, and Tim Meadows is like,
You
"Don't
don't
do
want
it.
none of this,
You don't want none of
Patrick."
this." Yeah.
exactly. And then I did, and I think the first time I played it, I think I accidentally stayed up until like 4 a.m. on a work night because I just time traveled. That's the only way to put it. And yeah, so Michael was completely right.
Yeah, it's it is fitting that the person who made that game has a background in making casino games, because it has a lot of the elements from what you would see in a casino that are designed to hook people, to kind of arrest your attention, to make you feel compelled to keep engaging with it. And I think it's miraculous that this game is not as exploitative as a casino game, and I know that the creator has been very adamant about it not being like that, which is very much to their credit, because this could easily be a game that makes a lot more money than it does in a much less ethical way because of how it's designed.
For sure. Louis?
I came into Vampire Survivors from Patrick and Petro. Told me that I was over at Patrick's place, and then they were just like, "Oh, you should like play it once." And I had one of those like pretty immediate Vampire Survivor like knockoffs that came out like on my phone. And so like when the game came out, I was like, I've played something that was similar to, but not like as well designed like as this thing, but like I don't know. It really
You had Werewolf Persister is what we're talking about.
I can't remember which one it was called. It wasn't bad. It was like there were enough like different things about it that I thought were interesting, but like it really stuck for me in that way that I always joke about. Like sometimes I have a hard time sitting down and like wanting to watch a movie, but like I can then watch like twice the amount of time of a film like on a TV show, you know, where it's just like 20 odd minutes like in a chunk that you then like repeat. And Vampire Survivors pulls on that same thing for me, right? You know, and I mean, and even Balatro, and I think a lot of the games, a lot of like roguelikes that have been popularized like since that point in time, where you know the run is going to be, they find like a way to maximize a certain amount of strategy in a very small amount of time, and like repeating that sort of cycle is like extremely addictive for me. Like it worked well when Vampire Survivor first came out.
Oh yeah, just the right amount of luck too. I feel like just the right amount of like to keep you coming back, to be like, oh, that was a bad draw, but I'll do it again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So what about Balatro with that? Like, what about that game? I think sucked you guys in, if it did.
I mean, and Balatro, in truth, is really as much a poker game as Vampire Survivors is a Castlevania game, which is to say not really much at all, but it's using its inspiration as a jumping off point for what the gameplay is. But I do like poker, and so I will admit, like, the initial draw for me was just, recognizing, I'm gonna, make my, I have two of a kind, or I have two pair, or I have a full house, or whatever. Like, the joy of finding like the good hand, and then I think the real shift with Balatro comes when you stop thinking of it like poker and start thinking of it like Balatro, and start thinking of what it actually means to make a good play, and what kind of optimizes your multipliers, what joker cards you get, which really for me often kind of was the make or break for my run, was like what joker cards was I pulling, and did I get the ones where I felt like I could ride it all the way to the end, or did I get some kind of shitty ones that were ones that just didn't go together with other stuff that I was pulling in terms of, the bonus cards or the planets or tarot cards or, all the other elements. And therefore kind of had to, I honestly, that game more than Vampire Survivors, I started abandoning runs if I wasn't getting certain sets of things the way I wanted, especially once I really got it in my head that I wanted to try to get all the way to the end. and that's
I
not
don't think I ever
necessarily a
abandoned a
bad thing. What's that?
So I don't think I ever once abandoned a run.
Oh, I restarted a bunch of times, but that's how these games go for me sometimes, where I get into a sense of kind of optimization in my head where I'm like, is this as good as it could be? And then if it's not, I kind of cut my losses and try again.
I had Balatro was similarly introduced to me from Patrick, because I had just like come over to his place one time and he was playing it, and he had already been fairly involved like in the process of it, so it was like interesting to see you. One, it's not like an engaging game to watch another person play.
Yeah, no.
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
it's not one to be like, oh, you can understand how it's fun by like seeing it happen. But also when you don't know,
Unlike Vampire Survivors, which is like kind of a spectacle with bright lights and a
Yeah,
lot
it
of
can be.
right.
action.
But then like also like not understanding any of the mechanics of it. Like it was funny to see how quickly Patrick was moving through like every round of Balatro. Like it was just like you knew like entirely, like there wasn't like a consideration on like what did you like, you knew what it was that you needed to hold, you knew like what you were like discarding, redrawing, like what you wanted. Like it was just like it was all happening like very quickly. And even though again that also isn't like good TV, like I recognized like that impulse of being like, okay, this thing is designed so well that like you learn this system and it just like works and clicks for you.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, I wanted that. Like I was like, I also want to get to that point because like that looks like I can tell that that's somebody like enjoying a thing.
Yeah.
You know, a
Right.
whole lot. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The only other the like 51 game Clubhouse or whatever that Switch has.
Clubhouse
they have
games,
President
yeah.
on there. Clubhouse games, yeah. Have you ever played President?
No.
It's a pretty simple card game. Essentially, you're just like going in a circle. I played that until I could beat the like highest level. They call them the impossible computer players. And I played it until I could beat all of them on Impossible, and there's 10 rounds, and you can win or lose rounds and still win at the end. It actually only matters where you place the final round. I played it until I could beat all 4 Impossible characters, all 10 rounds straight with like no issues. And then, but once you do that in President, like that's it. Like that's the best you can do, and I can pretty much usually just go back and do it again and not have any issue. And it's against computer players, so like, you know, I know their tricks and I know how to outsmart them. Balatro, since you're only really playing against yourself and only really playing against a score, and you can always increase your score, that I never hit the wall at the end. So I just like kept playing and playing. My proudest moment is that I beat the orange chip before they released an update to make it easier. It was like a few months ago they did some things because apparently too many people were complaining about beating the orange chip difficulty. But yeah, no, I just like it absolutely rewired my brain. And then I saw my real life poker game get much worse. Like I like completely rewrote my brain in what poker means, and then I started absolutely failing at real life poker.
Because you played 2 pair and you were like, but I leveled it up 6 times. What do you mean it's not better than your straight flush? You know what's funny, Patrick, is I get how Balatro could have kept its hooks in you kind of over and over again with that, you know, with you kind of not hitting a wall. I found once I finally beat a run, it was almost like I was breaking the surface of the ocean for a moment where I was just kind of like, okay. And I could have either chosen to dive back in or like grab a life preserver and get like pulled out. And I chose the life preserver because I was like, I need to do something else. But I've played a couple rounds since then and I could easily get sucked back in, but I found it was easier to detach myself from Balatro without unlocking anything as opposed to Vampire Survivors, which I literally only stopped playing when I unlocked every single thing in it prior to the Among Us DLC and all that stuff coming out. I played a little bit more of that, but that was by that point I had kind of dislodged myself enough that I was no longer hopelessly addicted. But it was a lot. Also, no, I realized, have we explained what either of these games actually are?
Well,
We've
no.
kind
So
of
this
just-
was honestly, this was meant to be a primer at first of just like how
Oh.
these games were addicting, and we
Sorry.
kind of just jumped on. No, that's fine because I think now we'll kind of jump in and try to get a little deeper into each one, starting with Vampire Survivors. Vampire Survivors is a 2022 roguelike shoot 'em up developed by Ponkel, the alias of Luca Galante, and released for all systems and mobile. The goal is simple: to pick a character and survive waves and waves of monsters by picking up additional weapons and upgrades. Over time, you unlock new items and relics to be used in future sessions, as well as slowly unlock some mysteries buried in the lore of this offbeat game. Initially a random itch.io project during an unemployment phase for Luca, he eventually moved it to Steam Marketplace, where it garnered the attention of some YouTubers and picked up major steam, no pun intended, shortly thereafter. This game has since adopted over 70,000 concurrent players on Steam, won multiple awards, including Best Game and Game Design at the British Academy Game Awards, and may soon have an animated series, which was announced in April of 2023. I don't know. I can see that face, Louis. I don't know what it would be about either, but I'm sure it would be wild. We have already gone a little bit into why this game felt addicting. Tro, to your point, how would you attempt to sum this game up to somebody who maybe doesn't play games?
So you pick a character who comes equipped with a weapon. Each character has a different weapon, and then you are put. It's like a retro pixel art type game, and you're put on this large field, and there are a bunch of enemies coming towards you, and your character automatically uses the weapon, and you just move them around.
Now,
That's
with that explanation,
basically,
Patrick, Louis, you hear that. Why is this game actually addicting? Because that doesn't sound very addicting to me.
Wait,
Or
can
fun,
I
for that
explain
matter.
it even more succinctly than Michael? Can I try to one up him? I
Yes,
think you
let's
just
go,
call
let's
it
get
a
it.
single stick shooter. Instead of a twin stick shooter, it's just a single stick shooter.
that's fair because the other stick would be doing the shooting, but
Right.
you don't have to do
I mean,
that.
and even then, that's only if you're using knives as like.
I mean, truly.
That is true.
Otherwise, you're playing like a semi-strategic walking game.
Which one of my favorite phases of the game is when you're in the early-ish stages, and it is kind of almost like some sort of like navigation challenge where you're just kind of the enemy hordes are starting to pick up. You haven't quite gotten any of those major weapon upgrades where you're really like mowing them down yet. Yeah, so you're kind of just weaving through them, being like, I'm just gonna kind of walk over here and find a path through the enemies until you can get enough experience to level up enough to not have to do that anymore.
Though I've always enjoyed starting with the garlic and getting to some rounds of those early stages where you can just walk through like bats and it's fine, and you just you kind of like, all right, I'm going to
Completely
be
still.
yeah.
You don't even have to move.
It's-
You just wait for the bats to come to you with the garlic, and you're good to go.
But I mean,
Well, I also
so-
try to now after unlocking things, I try to beeline it to the rings because I want to get all four of those like hidden pieces that the weird like sun and moon mask guys chase after you. I mean, seriously, this sounds like a fever dream. What do you guys think of? I think we kind of got into a little. What do you guys think of Vampire Survivors?
I mean, I think like to your question of like what it is that draws people in, it does. And when it moved to mobile, it made a lot of sense. It did that thing that like in every run that mobile games always do really well at first of creating a very like enticing amount of iterative progress, right? Like you only do one thing, walk around. And like the game does a good job at like being like, okay, you're going to walk around and then we're going to give you some new things that make walking around flashier and maybe easier, or maybe you just don't move at all. Or right, maybe it then makes you want to move to different corners of the map. Like it presents you with options like off of doing those things, and they come at you fast enough. You level up quickly enough, or level up in the sense that it works like for that game. That like it's an enticing loop because like further success is always immediately within your reach, like in the game, and that's the compelling part about it. If that further success is only you walk more. You do the same thing still with just like more sprites on your screen. Like, okay, but that's sort of, I mean, it's in the same way that I called Elden Ring Stardew Valley, I will also call Vampire Survivors Stardew Valley. Like, it is like it's just a game where you get better at doing your one thing so you can do more of that one thing more, and that's it. Like, and
Yeah.
somehow
You know,
though, like that loop like makes sense with like really good game design like behind it.
Well, I think one thing you bring up is the leveling up, because that is basically a dopamine hit. It's a dopamine hit, similar to mobile games. In the again, right? It's like that's what they try to entice you with. This actually has it because it's because every level up is a way to level up something else to be leveled up. I feel like I'm leveling up 2 weapons so you can get a special version of a single weapon.
Right.
That'll then unlock the character who has that weapon that can use on runs. It's very Inception like in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
The rabbit hole I started going. Oh, no, go ahead.
You go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say the rabbit hole I started going down also is that you can also find weapons and items in the levels, or if you're me, you just get that one tarot card that pulls everything to you that I picked every single time. And so then what I started doing was I would optimize my run by being like, well, I'm not going to pick this thing up yet from like the random pickup that I get when I level up, because I'm going to get it afterwards, because then I can get more weapons than the maximum allows me to. And then it starts to just like spiral off into, I just wind up like playing in what like looks like kind of illogical ways to kind of circumvent my way around to what feels like the most like min-maxed build I can get for that run.
Yeah.
I did the same thing, and I was going to bring up the tarot card, and No, you said go to get the rings. I don't think I ever once went to get the rings. I think I only ever used that tarot card to call everything to me, to then just like grab them, get the sun and moon people out so I could murder them quick, get the eggs,
No.
Because sun and moon people drop eggs, as everybody knows.
Look, this all makes perfect sense. Yeah.
That's so I've actually, maybe my first time playing through, long before the podcast, I'd gotten that card and I don't remember it. For this run and for this podcast, there have been DLC release. There have been a lot of extra stuff that have come out. I didn't get to any of that. I still haven't played any of that yet because I started fresh on my Steam. I had the phone version initially, and I wanted to play a console version. So I started fresh on my Steam Deck. And was so addicted to this game, I couldn't stop playing it, that I was just having fun re-unlocking all these things I'd seen before and trying to rediscover what combinations gave me the special weapons and all that. And that was enough for me to still fall in love and have a good time with this. I could only assume the DLC adds more, but I never got to unlock most of those tarot cards. So still, I'm probably, after we're done, I know I'm supposed to play our next game, but I'm probably going to play a lot more of Vampire Survivors.
Sorry. I know this isn't my podcast, but if I may ask a question to one of the other guests that's on here.
Please.
I'm curious, Petro, because I know this was like your big pandemic game, and like you really got into it.
You mean my paternity game?
That's the one. That's the one. What is?
I mean, 6 of one, half a dozen of another.
You replaying it, how did you feel about it? Because like I'll come up front and say that I found it a little lacking in going back to replay it, but I think that's only because I've found other versions of this same game that I like a lot more, that for my particular gaming taste, that I'm like, oh, this is actually the version of this game that like works for me a lot more.
See, there's a couple factors for me. One is that I actually, as into Vampire Survivors as I had gotten during the height of me playing it, both during my initial run on my Steam Deck that I had at the time, and then also actually fitting that we're recording this on my daughter's first birthday. We are commemorating basically a year of like, hey, happy birthday, Lilia, if you ever listen to this. But like fitting that's like what I was playing so much of at around this same time. And I think it's, one is that I just didn't get into the alternatives, and so I just didn't have much to compare it to. And then also, and this might help Louis if you really want to get locked into a game, is don't sleep at all for like a few weeks / couple months, and see what games your brain has the capacity to handle, and also you're taking care of an infant. So like the game that I could play, that I could either play with one hand while like cradling, while letting my baby nap on me, or it was basically just Vampire Survivors and Diablo 2 when she was like fully asleep and I was like sitting up on my Switch. Those were the games I had the brain capacity for. And so that's why and so for me, because I also know, similar to you this time around, I started over on mobile after having played it a bunch on Steam Deck. So I kind of did the opposite way. And I had no problem going through and unlocking everything again. And mobile is where I unlocked everything and just like never stopped. And so if I go back to the game at all, it'll be on mobile because I can't do that a third time.
Yeah, I also got it on mobile after playing it on Switch and unlocking basically everything. But this time, I started unlocking stuff in just the main game, but then I got the Contra DLC because I had never interacted with that at all. And it's interesting. It's actually, it feels a lot more like I was saying, a single stick shooter in the sense that like more of the weapons actually are directional based. It feels a lot, they all feel very much like Contra guns. Like you shoot like 3 red balls in like a, V pattern or you shoot like a gun straight forward. I pushed myself not to look up any of the solutions. I have not upgraded a single weapon that didn't carry over from the old game, and I have no idea what I'm doing wrong. I played it for probably about 40 to 50 minutes. No, probably more than that. I probably played it for like 2 hours. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm doing something wrong. But I'm actually like forcing myself not to spoil it because I'm like, oh, this actually feels like the first time I played Vampire Survivors. Like when I couldn't figure out how to upgrade, I forget the like scroll weapon, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what I needed to get to upgrade that.
For you guys that played both now, the Steam Deck version and the phone version, is there one? Is it just the portability of the phone version? What did you like more? Because I'll say, coming from the phone version first and then now doing like a console version, I feel like I had so much more control over my character. Sliding my thumb around my screen to move my guy, I felt like did not give me the precise movements I needed. It was kind of always my only one complaint was I found myself making dumb moves because it wasn't reading my thumb at some point, or enough smudging around. It caused problems, whereas I never really had that with the Steam. Also, the screen space I thought was nicer, having that horizontally than vertically. What do you guys think of the comparison of the two?
Yeah, I love it on console a million times more. I have trouble with the like virtual thumb stick for sure.
I agree, except unlike you guys, I'm really nasty at touchscreen movement, so I was able to adapt quickly. I think for me it was just the convenience of it is really kind of superseded everything else, and I tailored my play around whatever looseness of control I had compared to using a proper joystick. And again, I wound up getting through everything, so I made it work somehow. Would I have maybe done it a little bit faster if I had had better control? Probably, but that's not, I don't know. For me, that's not what this game is really about.
Well, right. I would argue the game also isn't built with, there are challenging parts to it, but it's not hard on a technical level. The having a joystick is like a much, like for me as well, like a better way to play it. But like you don't necessarily need a 1-to-1 entirely in what you hope to do on the screen and happen to still be able to do all of it. So
Yeah.
Can I ask a question of everyone?
Oh my God, guys, Jesus!
I
I
Christ.
know
go
we're
for it.
all playing host today.
I'm
Is
still
Vampire-
jet lagged. Honestly, this is easier for me. Go for it.
Is Vampire Survivors fun?
So,
Done.
well, so this is where, I mean,
Good night.
I don't.
Because that's a question I asked myself many times while
That's
playing it.
In playing games that take the same formula and then do different things, I found versions of it that I liked a lot more, even with like respect to Vampire Survivors of being like a well designed and well thought out game. Like it's not my favorite like of them. I mean, all right, I'm gonna have to drop Brotato
I was about
into
to
this
say,
I was going to say,
conversation.
was it Brotato?
There's not a way that I can continue to talk about it or criticize it without talking about like what I liked more in other versions of it, and specifically what Brotato did. One, Brotato is a game of 21-minute rounds where at the end of every round you then pick power-ups that you purchase. So there are intentional breaks in the thing, which then also allow you to just stop entirely and then pick back up from like the last like level select where you are. And because the min max works a lot more in like a almost like a tower defense or like a strategy based game, and like where you're tweaking intentional numbers to like change your like DPS output to understand like what the scale is going to look like at every level. Like there's a strategy to me that's a lot more satisfying in something like that. They don't do there isn't like the whole melding thing that Vampire Survivors does, where it's like you get like a better weapon if you've got this thing and this thing. It is things just sort of maximized. In certain things, there's certain synergies that do work, but like it kind of runs separately, and like the very distinct ways that like all of that sort of stuff shakes out for me, I liked that a lot more. And I was like, okay, what for me Vampire Survivors did was like firmly establish a genre that I was like, I get it and I understand it. And I do think I spent a lot of time with it. I think at the base it is a fun thing, but like there are much more fun versions of that thing that hit on more gameplay mechanics and that make me feel like even if what I'm still doing is like a single stick shooter, like that are actually incorporating more into the entirety of it.
Yeah, I don't even know what fun means.
I've seen which games you rate high. You don't seem to know what fun means. No, like I'll be honest. Like yes. Short answer, yes. It's a fun game. That being said, I'm not sure the fun is necessarily in the moment-to-moment gameplay of it, as it is in the discovery aspect. Almost similar to Shadow of Colossus in a weird way. In that, like, I think if I found myself constantly hitting my head against the wall in Shadow of Colossus, unable to solve something, I may not have fun with it. But part of the fun was the trial and error and discovery of what that game had underneath and how to accomplish it. I think some of the most fun I had in Vampire Survivors was like, what are these other mysterious characters here? What are these weapons they have? Because I'm only seeing like 8 or so at a time. What is this dog-shaped creature, and why does he have flowers, right? Why is this level just have a shit ton of question marks, and now I'm fighting a giant eyeball or an amalgamation of all 5 versions of death as a boss? Like, I think that aspect of the like it's almost what helped drove both recent Zeldas around, is like what is around this corner. And I think the fun comes as much from that as it is from the gameplay, because there is an absolute power trip of running around in this flurry of explosions and Bibles and scythes, just screaming, "I am a god, watch me roar," toward the later parts of these levels. But I don't think that in and of itself would have been enough if there wasn't the aspect of mystery behind this. And I'll be honest, to get to a little bit into Balatro, which we'll talk about later, I think is what put this over for me, as I don't feel like I had that or never really had that drawn out in Balatro.
I find that interesting because I like, similarly, unlocking things is like why I really loved both of these games, and like going back and looking and seeing that I still had a Joker that was not unlocked, and like trying to figure out how to unlock it in Balatro was very similar to like, okay, I know there's like some weapon mix that I'm like missing. What's a thing that I have yet to see meld together, or like what looks like it should work together, and sort of like pushing myself in those ways was definitely huge. Yeah, I mean, to the earlier thing of like fun, I don't know. I have a hard time saying what fun is. I do like puzzles, and I like unlocking things, and I like figuring things out. And I think that like that is sort of the like excitement that I would get from a particularly good run in Vampire Survivors of like, I thread the needle. When I was weak, I ran between enough enemies and like navigated my way through in a way that made me successful. And then now that I'm overpowered, I literally killed death enough times that they had to send in super death. Like that feels very rewarding. But yeah,
I think. Oh, no.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Pedro.
I think I asked that question because of kind of the points that you guys are bringing up, where the satisfaction of Vampire Survivors doesn't actually come from, or I'd say the kind of greater sense of satisfaction that keeps you playing doesn't really come from the core gameplay loop. It comes from the reward system and all the things in the periphery of it that happen as a result of you engaging with that gameplay. And so I think there were runs where I would either get really close to 30 minutes and flame out towards the end, or get to the end of a run and decide to do one more where I felt more strung out than someone who was having a good time. And the true rewarding moments were unlocking secret levels or weird, going to that one level that turns into a fever dream partway through, or all the other stuff that's buried in that game. But I also wonder if, when I'm considering these games in kind of a greater pantheon of of what makes for the greatest game of all time, do I reward a game for keeping me hooked because of the unlockables, or do I reward a game for keeping me hooked because I think the gameplay itself is inherently more fun, which is what I would say about Balatro versus Vampire Survivors if I'm comparing them. I didn't find the unlockables for Balatro as compelling, but I would sooner go back to that game to play it because I think the act of playing it is more immediately gratifying.
If I could jump in and get a little high-minded for a second, I think what Vampire Survivors did well, and what I'm guessing to a certain degree made the game blow up, was a bit of an idea. TV writers talk all the time about how what studios want to buy are shows that people can watch while they're also doing something on their phone. Like, if you are a show that needs subtitles, or that you need an intense close watch for, if it's not something you can watch while you're folding your laundry or making dinner or something like that, you really have to pay attention to. There isn't an interest in doing that, and there's
second screen.
Right? Yeah, right. And there's perhaps an idea to the attention economy that exists in how we consume things now. And I think there's an interesting argument to make that Vampire Survivors is a great example of a game that allows you to do something else. If you want to more intensely watch a TV show but also play a game at the same time while it's going on, Vampire Survivors is your girl. And you can absolutely do. It's funny, Petra, that you brought up Diablo 2, because Vampire Survivors and Diablo 3 were great exercise bike games for me, where it's like I could really dial into what was happening in a run for a game and care a lot about it while I was also exercising, and it wasn't distracting me from like keeping the pace that I wanted to, and I wasn't going to be worse at it while exercising, you know, like at the same time. And I think there is an interesting value to an idea of like a well-designed game that you can take with you to do with other things, you know, right? Like it's not, you know, it's not going to be, I don't know, you know, like Final Fantasy VII or, you know, or something like that. But like
Right.
that's, you know, arguably like not what the point of it, you know, maybe like is, you know, with all, I mean, the fact that like, you know, we all joked about like how on the phone it's a dangerous thing, right? Because you miss subway stops and things like that. And it's
it
like,
did do that.
paired with traveling all of a sudden, you know, right, or doing anything else, then it is like an excellent companion, like in that way. Is I think something also valuable to put on the table for, and that is like intent in the game design of how it works, you know, right? That it that it's able to then be and do something like that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody from my job listens to this podcast, but just in case they do, don't worry, I'm not talking about your meeting. But I definitely, in preparation for this podcast, played a little off-cam Vampire Survivors on my phone, you know, during like Zoom presentations or whatever, because it's like, I can keep listening to you talk to me about the roadmap while I'm fiddling with this thing, and like you're just going to talk at me for 45 minutes. I need to engage my brain in something with like fun flashy lights and like a little bit of interest, like so that I could not want to claw my skin off listening to a like 45-minute speech. So it definitely helped with that.
Fair, guys. I want to get some Balatro in here before we do. I want to kind of pause it back to your question here, Tro, and the fact that like, are any of these things mutually exclusive from fun, right? In the end, fun itself does not necessarily have a criteria, as two games could have the same things that make them fun and be wildly different. I think that this game could be fun and be fun not because of its gameplay. Doesn't make the fun you had or how good it is any less valid per se. It just makes it different, which is once again points back to the fruitlessness of this podcast's overall point in the first place.
Don't reflect on it too much. We can't. Everything's gonna fall apart.
There's blood out the nose. Friends, I wear a lot of hats in my life. And I want to say right now, if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoy the discourse I have on this podcast, you enjoy the conversations we are having, then I invite you to check us out on YouTube at the Kaiju Lounge. And I'm putting this out there because while this audio podcast, if you're listening to it as such, is a great place to get all your audio listening done, your podcast listening needs done, this is just one of many things we are doing on the YouTube channel, the Kaiju Lounge. That's right. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm promoting the YouTube channel. Skip ahead because you don't need to hear this. As a matter of fact, I don't know, send me money, kaijulounge.com. But for those of you who are listening, I would implore you, check out what we're doing over at the Kaiju Lounge on YouTube, at Boss Monster Kaiju if you need to type in the URL, because we got a lot of great stuff. You know, I do con visits here and there. I'm working on some more written essay stuff, but the big meat and potatoes I want to invite you guys to check out is my interview series, My Guest Tonight, where I get to talk to a lot of really great people, all about nerd culture and the little corners of it they inhabit. We've got an interview coming out very soon with one half of the team behind Holy Wow Studios, who made Trombone Champ and the upcoming Trombone Champ Unflattened, the VR game, Dan Vaquito. We go all into making that jump, the experience of that leap, and why he makes such offbeat games in the first place. We've also had some great interviews with the likes of Eileen Level, the woman behind Anatomo Con, the free anime convention that happens in New York City. I sat down with Jacob Lingle of Kaiju United, the one-stop shop for all things kaiju and tokusatsu-related news. I've spoken to voice actors, game developers, esports tournament organizers, all walks of nerd culture, whether you are into anime, movies, comics, video games. You know, we not only ask the how and the what, but we get really into the why, and we get into some really great conversations, similar to the kind of introspective conversations we do here. And if that's your thing, I implore you to check out youtube.com at Boss Monster Kaiju. Please subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss another great video, interview, tidbit, quip, update, whatever it is. Let this be your home for humor, opinions, and nerd shit. With that, let's talk about another game that everyone had a lot of fun with, which is Balatro. Balatro is a 2024 poker-themed roguelike deck-building game developed by Local Thunk and published by PlayStack. It has also been released for all consoles, and between the period of choosing to do this episode and filming this episode, was released on Android and iOS. In the game, players must draw various poker hands to defeat blinds and earn a number of points before moving on to the next round. Over time, the players can collect various game-changing cards like jokers that add point multipliers or change how cards are played, tarot cards and spectral cards that can alter cards in your deck, and planet cards that level up the various poker hands, making them worth more points. Within the 8 hours of the game's release, it had made over $1 million in gross revenue and became a huge hit, earning 90 to 95 percentile scores across the board, and is currently nominated for the Golden Joystick Award in Best Indie Game, Best Audio Design, and PC Game of the Year. When you guys heard about Balatro, let's before we get into playing it, when you guys heard about Balatro, did it sound interesting to you, or was it the prodding and all the high remarks from your friends and stuff that actually brought you in?
So I think between hearing about it for the first time and downloading it was probably about 20 minutes for me. Like I've been like YouTube pilled. I'm not really proud of this, but like I watch YouTube videos of like people playing Project Zomboid and like video game reviews and stuff like that. And one for Balatro popped up. I don't remember if it had released yet or if it had like just come out. But essentially it was somebody talking about what it was. It might have even just been a trailer, like a brief trailer and intro on IGN or something like that. And I was like, I love poker and like I love deck builder games. Like I'd been really into Slay the Spire and a couple of others. So I was like, all right, yeah, I'll grab this. And oh God. And then I think probably I'd be surprised if all three of you didn't hear about it from me. Because I would not stop talking about it.
Yeah, for me, like there isn't much like convincing or provocation that's needed on like a niche like gameplay element roguelite. Like let's go. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you're going to like poker is going to be like the element, but like it's still like a roguelite and it's still like it like has the same like amount of like strategy and build and like action and fighting to it. Like not a problem, right? Like all of the deck builder ones I loved. I've put a stupid amount of time into Dice Folk recently. Like I will always like take these things. So like yeah, once Patrick started talking about it, it was not a hard sell at all. Like I wasn't like, I don't understand how this could be a game that people find enjoyable. I was like, no, like let's go. Let's do this.
I'll say I was intrigued. I'd probably heard about it from various podcasts, and I was intrigued by the idea of a poker roguelike type game. I normally am not super into deck building games, although having played enough Balatro, now I'm wondering if I should go back and maybe try Slay the Spire or something like that.
It's very good.
So
You
yeah.
should.
So good.
So who knows? Maybe I'll change my tune there. But but yeah, I didn't really. Honestly, I didn't even really just commit to playing it until we decided to do it for this episode. But it was not because I didn't want to. It just kind of had been on my back burner, and this was an excuse to pull it off and bring it to the fore. So I picked it up on Switch, and yeah, I kind of implied before, but I liked playing this quite a bit. It was a very fun game. And to circle back just briefly on my previous question about Vampire Survivors, I never questioned during Balatro if I was having fun playing the game, which was a thing I had done during Vampire Survivors. But I'll hold off on the rest of that thought till we get to our rankings.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm gonna pop in as a dissenting voice here, in that I did, like, I'll be honest, and I don't know why. For everything I've seen, for everything I've heard other people talk about it, like, I understand why people love it, but it just never sunk its claws into me. And I've to the point where I've tried playing it, being like, why is this not clicking with me? And now, admittedly, I'm not a poker guy. I've never really enjoyed card games like that. It's not been my thing. But I don't think that's it, because I don't think you need that to like this game. And so this is something I've been trying to explore, because really I'd play it in the back of my head, because I was playing both this and Vampire Survivors at the same time. I kept being like, ooh, I gotta get one more run. I gotta find something in Vampire. I kept being drawn back to Vampire Survivors in a way that I was excited to play that. Where this, I was just like, it was like, yeah, I get it, it's cool, but it truly never sunk into me in the way that it sunk into. And this, honestly, this was the wedding game. This was the game that I heard random people were talking about, and just like people who don't identify as gamers, didn't know that I was a gamer, like, just came up casually. So, like, obviously, this cat has claws. It just never got into me. I'd be curious to hear from you, you guys who did get into it and understood it. Like, why would that be? What's wrong with me, guys? Help me out.
I don't know, but I mean, I'll first start out by saying that, like, playing Balatro to me feels like itching scratching an itch that exists inside of my brain. Like, I don't know if it, like, again, the question of fun or whatever, like, it just feels like a relief, and like it's just like in there, and I don't know, I feel so good about like outsmarting the game, or like picking the right thing, or discarding the right cards or something like that. And it felt like it rewrote certain patterns inside of my head. I mean, like,
did it expand your mind, Patrick?
No. My mind is unexpandable. It's very small.
Oh, poor Glover.
His brain is swollen. He's got a massive concussion.
It's just juice and yeah. No, I just like I don't know maybe why it didn't hook you. I don't know, like, I picture like maybe 6 months from now you might pick it up again and like it just hits right or something like that. It just and certainly I don't think it's a value judgment on anybody who does or does not engage with it. Like,
I appreciate that.
Well, of course, it's just like, you know, all games, to some extent it's taste, to other extent it is a thing that you can rank and verifiably say that is how good it is, and nobody can say anything against it. But Balatro just, like, okay, so for example, I have to ask you, like, when you started playing, did you ever have the realization that, like, oh, I can make a hand that doesn't exist in actual poker? And, like, did that excite you at all? Because the first time I was like, wait a second, I could do a 5 of a kind. And I was like, oh, fuck, I'm, like, breaking the rules. And then the first time you do that, if you continue to play after getting a 5 of a kind, you then see that there's a planet card for 5 of a kind, or there are jokers associated with 5 of a kind. And it's like, you're slowly uncovering that the game is inviting you to break it. To break, like, poker to some extent, but also just to break the game itself, to, like, find these other things. And for me, that was, like, the first time I did that, I feel like it felt like, oh, wow, the game is so open and there's so many things I can do. And so for a while, I feel like I just played like exploring different strategies. And then I ended up with a strategy that I find actually basically everybody uses, which is a 5 of a kind flush. And if you use the checkered deck, which is just 2 suits, and either go hard on spades or on hearts, you can get to a point where you basically just have so many of the same card, you can get a 5 of a kind flush. And it's like, oh, okay, great. But yeah, I don't know. Like, did any of that stuff ever click where it's like, oh, there are things I can find in here? Because you said that was there for Vampire Survivors, so.
Yeah, no, it didn't. Though that those things didn't click to me or come up to me, but also again, part of my first couple of rounds was like learning the hands of poker. Like when I say I don't play, I don't play, and it's one of those things where like the few times I ever had, I've had to have like my iPhone open on the side to remind me what each type is and what's better than what and what all those things mean. So I think there was an element of that coming into it, where it's like, and I know that's for most people it's a common. I'm kind of an outlier in life in general when it comes to that. Those things never stuck with me. And so because of that, I never really thought to try 5 of a kind. It always told me you could play up to 5, but only these hands would handle. So I hadn't thought much about that. And I tried not to do research for the game as well, because I want to, I want to come in with a blank slate and discover it there. So that might have been part of it, because there wasn't the sense of adventure getting into the game in the same way. Like truly, I bring up the I don't know what it was called, the combo death boss in Vampire Survivors, because that comes up, after playing the same level multiple times and like coming around and like something pops up in the corner being like, that's weird, that's different. And I never got that intrigue pull in. And I think maybe for me personally, I need that more with games. I need some of the less obvious elements to surprise me. Or to have that, and if it doesn't feel like I have that, or if I guess in this case don't find it, then it does put it at a disadvantage as far as my eyes.
I'll be honest, Patrick, I had no idea you could do 5 of a kind.
Oh yeah,
That was never a thing I stumbled upon.
A handful of like made up hands that you can do by nature of like how you just like make your deck work, and that's like what I really like about Balatro and a lot of my favorite games are that it's exceptionally dry at the core, but there is like whimsy to it then, and like this is a game, it's funny at like a lot. There's a lot of like very academic jokes that are like put into
the banana.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. The 2 different breeds of bananas that can go like you can lose and can go like extinct is like a historical joke. Like there's a lot of like good stuff, but yeah, also in the gameplay mechanics, there's a lot that they give everything to you specifically to be like, use this to break and like do better, and like that's like I will always like love a game that like operates in that sort of fashion. That said, there are things about it where it's not as, because it's a little dry, like it's not as, there are luck elements to it. But it doesn't, like Petro was saying, the idea that you sometimes like you can abandon a run. I also did that. I played that game that way as well a lot, like where I would just stop a run that I was on because I was like, this isn't going to work out in the same way. And Balatro isn't really a game where if you're not doing a great run, you're going to be able to like magically turn things around. Like
Right.
There are some roguelikes where you can get something that's a haymaker and then that turns around, and that's fun for me. This isn't that sort of game. It is sort of about intentionally building something like from the start all the way through. And it's good. I mean, not to spoil too much of where I'm going to be at the end. I think Balatro is one of like the best designed games I have ever played, but that does not mean that it is one of my favorite games of all time. But I can absolutely like recognize and respect like what they did to make the game work the way that it does, to give me the satisfaction that I get from playing an entirely different game in the same way.
Yeah.
I won't say this is Stardew Valley, but there are a lot of other games that I could probably compare to that are nothing like, like this game at all.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw any of this stuff, but there's also when it comes to like, well, the music is just like excellent,
Yeah.
and it's not a long loop,
It's
but
good.
it plays so well, and like it kind of feeds that like you can play for a long time, and you're listening to the same thing, and it's just like, I don't know, I think it kind of helps engage with that. But then there's even there's a random multiplier for the for one of the jokers. It basically can add some random number between like 0 and 30 to your multiplication. What somebody just discovered like 3 weeks ago is that it also tells you the next card that's going to come out, like the card that's on top of your deck that will come out to your hand next. It flashes like an H, an S, a P, or a C for like spades, clubs, hearts, shit. Oh,
Diamonds.
clover. Yeah,
Pymons.
diamonds. Pymons.
Blue moons.
There is a D.
Yeah.
Sorry, not a P.
Pymons
Yeah,
are forever.
I did SP like spades. But it like tells you that and tells you the value of the card that's coming next. And somebody just noticed that that's like in the code. And it flashes by in an instant, so it's like pretty easy to miss, but it just is like, I also, to your point, Noah, like you don't have to hold your iPhone down because there's a single button that you can press to pull up all of the hands and the multipliers that you have associated with them.
True.
Based on
Yeah.
like the planet cards. Like it has such a good like, it put in all the references you needed. It like had a bunch of Easter eggs. It has good music. So like to the best designed, I really feel like it is, from a user experience level, like probably one of the most brilliant pieces of software I've seen in like how well it supports the thing that it's doing.
Yeah.
I
I want to get back to a point that you were saying, Louis, about being a well-designed game, but doesn't make it like one of your top games. In that, like, what is the what does that look like in general on a broader picture? What is a well-designed, a really good designed game that is fine? What is a great game that is okay design? And what is both?
I mean, so for another example, for a game that I think is like immaculately designed for what it does, but like it just does not work for me. Honestly, much more so negatively than Balatro, a game that I do find like very favorable. Overcooked is a great example of something that I think is wonderfully designed, but is not the game for me. Like I was like, as a puzzle game and also as an action game, I was like, I recognize that it is operating like at a top level for what like the constraints and the controls are. And I was like, and like the level design is incredible. Like on every one of these, there's very unique challenges, but it just doesn't. It ultimately like can't keep the same thing going for me. Like in the way like where it's just like, okay, like this isn't the kind of game. Then like ultimately,
Yeah.
Is your poorly designed best game Thief Simulator?
no.
Or Ski Sniper?
No, it is absolutely. I'm struggling to think right now like what an example of a game that I know isn't great, but that I still put like a lot of time into is that isn't. I don't know. That isn't like a mobile game or something like that. Like I know I have them on like console or like for something that's maybe a little bit more intentional. I mean,
Right. Buck Bumble.
actually, you know what? I would say Saints Row was reelected. That is a game that
Which-
like I will the right is that the
Which one is
third
that?
one?
yes
That's third, yeah, because third is when they actually leaned into the ridiculousness. I feel like.
I've only played 4, so I
No,
can't speak to.
four is Saints Row reelected.
Yeah, that's the one I
Okay.
played.
Okay.
Like that's a game that like it's just like it's stupid. It's up until that Dragon Ball Z open world RPG game, I was like, this is maybe the best example of what like a Superman game looks like.
Right.
Like but it's not like I wouldn't say it's not great, but like I've played through that campaign multiple times in the same way. every time too. Like it's not like I'm doing anything different. I also designed my character to look like Sherman Klump every single time. Like I'm not even playing
It's been
a
out for 11 years, and
character.
you keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, and it's like I'll just go back and like replay it, and there's something about that though, whereas it's like it's not great. I was like, but this is a lot of fun still. Like even with the gaps, like the shooting is pretty shitty. If you put it up on like the highest difficulty, it's tough in a way that you can't actually like master. Like there's not like a good way to do it. Like it's poor game design in that way. But,
Would
like,
you still be having as much fun if you weren't playing as Sherman Klump?
No, that's tough to say. I guess anything with a creative character that lets me do.
Listen, if you're not beating a person to death with a giant dildo as Sherman Klump,
What are you even doing with your life?
They are not living.
yeah, I have a very relevant hot take on a poorly designed great game, and I think Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is that. I don't know if you guys have played it.
I haven't played it.
I haven't got to jump on it yet. No.
Is that the new one?
It is. It's the
Is
newest
that
one.
the one with the Lady Link?
It is. It's,
is that your design quibble, Patrick?
yeah.
Right.
No, but it's a phenomenal game. But when
You can't play as Zelda the boy. It's really confusing.
when you unlock Echoes, you just add them to either pressing the direction pad to the right, and you get a menu of all of the echoes you've unlocked in a straight line that you can sort in a few different ways, but I argue none of them are really what you want. And you have to use the left stick as you open the menu with the right direction pad. Or sorry, vice versa. The right button on the direction pad with the right stick, like in your right hand, to navigate a single line of all of the echoes that you've unlocked, which there are 127. So by the end of the game, you're navigating this whole thing. It's like a pain in the ass, but yet it was still a really fucking fun game. And by the end, you certainly like get to a place where you're like, okay, you use the last use echo. You're going to be using probably 10 echoes. There are ones I never even used at the bottom of the list, but occasionally you need a specific one. You just have to navigate this thing all the way back. It doesn't tell you a lot of things about what you can and can't do. It doesn't remind you about things. Like, it is not a game that either teaches you to like use things regularly or gives you the tools to do it well. But it's a lot of fucking fun. So strongly recommend you play it. But it is not well designed, I would argue.
You're really sold it there, sir.
Sounds like your primary design issue is with the menu interface, which is not a minor issue if you're interacting with it a lot.
It's the menu. It's how you lock onto things. It's how you use the powers you're given. It's no spoilers, but there's even a separate feature of how you can like shift the type of game that you're playing for a little bit. That's clunky and like not very well done and not very well gamified. Again, these are all things that I think could have either been designed better or been given a pass in like a UI UX way to make it better. But I still
can we all just come to the conclusion that almost all Zelda games are good games with poor design?
Tears
I feel
of the
like
Kingdom, I think, is there too. Yeah.
I think
Tears of the Kingdom, Ocarina of Time. I'll say it. Like, Louis, would you say? I probably disagree with it.
I said I don't think Ocarina of Time was great. The fighting in that was trash.
But like, I think as soon as they got 3D, I think like most Zelda games fall into this category of kind of like maybe not the best design technically, but most if not all pretty freaking good games still.
Yeah. Even the level design, I think, is like a little clunky. Well-designed puzzles, but again, I think when we talk about design, that might be outside of like some of like what is like good gameplay, bad design, and I do think that's a pretty good example of that.
Oh, it's interesting. I don't have an example for this yet, although Noah, this is kind of like what I texted you about as a separate idea for an episode of the show, which was to kind of pick a game that we would consider to be like the worst game that we love.
Yes, you're right. I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right, and I want to do that.
So we're gonna have to re-review Daydream and Davey.
Just say, heat back up Omicron Nomad Soul.
I say, Patrick,
Never mind, I'm out.
I'm gonna have to borrow your Wii U so I can play Star Fox Zero again and make you all play it.
Amazing.
But yeah, I mean to circle back around to the games we're talking about, I guess the
What? Why? Go on.
it's funny because I think that the I didn't, Patrick, have the depth of gameplay experience it sounds like you and Louis probably did with Balatro, but I still really liked it. And I think it was more just I found kind of things that I wanted to optimize. And I talked earlier in the episode about how I would restart a lot. And I think that was because once I found things I liked, I wanted to find ways to maximize those. And I think if I kept playing to the degree that I played something like Vampire Survivors, I would probably get to a place where I was experimenting more with like different selections and whatnot, and like different, loadouts, for lack of a better term. But like, I mostly wanted to optimize the way, because my immediate goal was get to an end of a run. My way of playing the game was different, where I was really just so hyper focused on like getting all the way through the way I kind of wanted to play it, if that makes any sense. So there were certain things the banana goes extinct. I have to circle back on this because I used that banana
Yeah,
joker.
the Gros Michel is it has a 1 in 4 chance of basically deleting itself at the end of a
Right.
play.
I had the one that was 1 in 6, I think. But yeah.
Or sorry, I think it actually used to be 1 in 4 and then they changed it to 1 in 6. There is another banana card called Cavendish that only shows up once the Gros Michel is deleted, and it can show up in the shop after that. And it's a reference to the fact that the banana strain Gros Michel is extinct, and Cavendish is a much more resilient banana strain that is the one that we know now. That story of like their banana flavor in candy was closer to what bananas tasted like when there was a bigger variety of banana, which is maybe apocryphal, but does reference a real thing that happened in that we had variety of banana species and lost at least one entire one due to over basically cloning and then a disease that wiped it out. So yeah.
Wow.
Okay. I had no idea. My favorite Joker card was the one where it would count any card you played.
Yes.
Because that was where the game of poker really fell apart for me, was once I got that Joker one, I was like, I'm play. And then that was also when I stopped discarding, because unless I had a Joker that really like counted on discards, I would just say, screw it. I'm just playing everything. And I'll play, I only have a pair. Well, I'm just playing all these cards anyway. And I'm just gonna kind of stack up the points. And I think that was the run where I got all the way to the end.
That makes sense.
The vampire one I avoided like the plague, because I was like, why would I want it to take away the like special nature of all these cards that I've upgraded? But it is like it basically ramps really quickly. So if you get it early and have like a bunch of junk cards that you've added like a +4 multiplier to, you can really beef it up quickly. So
if you like run a lot of things that like get you a lot of money, like it's very cheap to be able to add like specialties,
for sure.
cards. So like
That was also, I think, the reason why I restarted a lot, was because I sometimes found that I really needed to invest in certain cards from early on in the run for them to be worthwhile, and I would get annoyed if something like that showed up late, to the point where I'd be like, well, there's no point in me buying this card that I need, would have needed, it increases its multiplier, like the number of hands I play, but I'm 3 rounds away from the end. So like, why would I pick this thing? And I don't know if that's a knock against the game, because I think that's part of how you're intended to play it, is kind of plan and invest, but it was still something of a frustration point, because it wasn't something I could like make use of later. And I think that just kind of like bugged a certain obsessive part of my brain that this game sometimes triggered in certain ways.
I think like in the way that I call this game dry, like that's, to me, that's some of the idea of what the discovery in the game is doing runs that you're going to abandon because they're not going to be the optimized ones, but then you understand how some of these things work to do the optimized run, like ultimate. And I think there's something interesting about a game that sort of reframes or forces you to consider differently, like how you want to play it. I mean, Petro, I know something that has kind of stuck with me. I don't know if this was on podcast or not, but I can't remember what like From Software game you were talking about. But like you were saying that it sort of like changed your idea of like how you saw progress, like in a game,
Yeah.
know.
It was when
and
I
going-
first got in it. It was basically when I first figured out how to get into Demon Souls. That is what, after bouncing off it for a few times, that was kind of, my understanding of what it meant to progress in a game and kind of learning what I learned from my failed attempts. It was funny that you brought that up because I started thinking of that when you were describing it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is.
And that's something that stuck with me because like that actually you talking about that really helped me in now it is like my deep love of XCOM 2. But I thought about that a lot when I was playing Balatro because I was like, I was approaching it at the beginning the same way that I would most roguelites. Because also I would treat jokers like my friends, and I'd be like, if I got them, I'd be like, we're doing this all the way to the end now. I was like, you guys are my best friends, and I'm never leaving you, and that was like always the worst strategy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've got to reorient like how I consider playing this game if I want to be good at it. And there are elements that it's just
Right.
like I never wanted to consider using. I was like, but they were created for the game, so I've got to look at what they are. There'd be runs where it's just like, well, let me try this to understand what it is if it's already not a great run, and then I'd be like, okay, now I understand this thing, then let me go back and like try it again. And that was extremely useful at getting better at the game.
I do have an important question too, Noah, for somebody who kind of bounced off of it. Did you get to a place where you realized that the order of the jokers is a thing that you control and actually matters? Same with the order of the cards that you play. So essentially, like, if there's a joker that's a multiplier, if you put it all the way to the right, it'll be the last thing that hits. So anything that adds a multiplier will then make sure that it's added before the final one multiplies. Or even playing cards, like, you can organize them and even how you play them. So even though it's a straight, like, you can put the lowest card first if it's going to add a multiplier before another one multiplies it, like a glass card.
Yeah, that I was starting to kind of play around with a little bit, which I will say was fun. It was fun, interesting, but it just wasn't quite like, ooh, I didn't keep me up at night, right? That same
It
level
kept
of
me up
excitement.
if I never abandoned a run, but what I did do occasionally was, with the quickness, hit the reset button, like just power off the switch if I had like flubbed the order and realized it as it was running. Because that's another thing too. Like, you can't save, play a hand, and be like, oh, I fucked that up. Like, that wasn't the best hand that I could have played, or like, oh, my finger slipped and I discarded, or I wasn't looking at the blind and forgot that this is the one that you can't play a 5-card hand for, because it'll just let you and then tell you get 0 points. There's no point estimate that shows up before you submit the hand, so you only find out after you play it. I definitely a few times like quick set turned it off, because then if you quit out of the game and start back, it puts you at the start of that hand if it didn't get too far in the scoring process.
Jesus. All right, guys, we got to move on to the actual ranking reviewing. We've been talking about both these games for a while, so let's get into it. For those who may be watching for the first time, this is how it works. My guest and I will be giving each of these games a ranking we can only use once in perpetuity. That means in the history, the future, whatever of this podcast, we can only give that score once. If, let's say, and I don't think anyone would ever actually do this, but let's say someone wanted to give a game a 10. It'd be silly to use a 10 on this, at the highest score possible. Let's say some idiot, some absolute ignoramus wanted to give a game a 10. They could never give any other game a 10 ever again. They give 9.5, a 9.55, a 9.42069, if you will, but they can't give it a 10. This is the list. I don't know. I feel like I might be targeting somebody, but I can't tell. As of right now, we have 41 games on the list so far. We're too long to start naming these all one at a time, but I'll say at the moment, at the bottom of our list, our bottom 5 are E.T., Daydreaming Davy, Omicron the Nomad Soul, Glover, and Tin Head. Our top 5, in comparison for that, is Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Mario Kart Double Dash, Super Mario World, Elden Ring, and Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Guys, let's get on into it, and I am going to start, Louis, with you.
Yeah.
Balatro. What are
Ooh.
you giving Balatro?
First. Okay. Um Again, I really thought Balatro was a well put together game. I didn't play it. I played it a lot. I didn't play it nearly as much as I know some other people did. There are definitely similar sort of roguelikes. Dice Folk, I think, is a game now that I've clocked more time in than like I did with Balatro. But like, I love what it can do. I love hearing about some of the things for other people. When we talk about similar to Vampire Survivors, some of the exploration and the periphery parts. I've got a buddy of mine that sends me like his end run, like pictures. He sends me screenshots of like a really good run that he did. Like, and I love that the game was built to be able to do that sort of thing as well. Like, and I think that's important, sort of outside of all of this. I would give Balatra's a solid enough game that I want to give it like a very like it's like a solid score. None of this messing around with with a bunch of decimal points.
This is shocking for you, but go on.
I know. It's not a thing that I do often, but like I like this game. I think it's really good. I want to give it an 8.2. Clean.
Wow.
A clean 8.2, which is available to you, so you are good. Love to see that. Patrick, let's go to you. What are you thinking?
Look, I know I'll be an outlier on this, but like this just hit right. I mean, really, the only things I can complain about it are that like things that I like about games are engaging with other people. Like I like a multiplayer experience. I like being able to like play with somebody else. The only thing that Balatro is really missing is the ability to engage with others. But for everything else, to me, it's like it is a perfect game for me. It's well designed. It had discovery. It had play. It was like the perfect amount of puzzle and like all of that. So I'm going high. I'm gonna give it a 9.6.
9.6. All right.
We already used that for duck.
Just slightly above Duck Hunt. Okay. No, yeah, you have 9.6 available. You are in the clear. Balatro, what do you think?
Oh boy, I now I'm worried I'm undercutting folks with what I was gonna give.
It's okay. I will too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we already know Noah's coming, so it's fine.
and it's possible that I will circle back on this game and find more to it because hearing, I not to keep. I originally wasn't going to bring up From Software's games at all this time because I feel like I bring it up almost every episode.
Bullshit.
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 But Louis already brought it up, and so it's out there. But
We know
honestly,
you
like,
better than you know you in that case.
Patrick, you talking about how you learned to play Balatro and discovering all those things reminds me of playing Dark Souls for the first time, where I just like ducked behind a shield and like upgraded the first like decent weapon I found and like managed to eventually get to the end of the game, which is kind of how I played Balatro for the first time. I kind of just found the build directions I liked and kind of eschewed everything else in favor of getting it to my destination. But that's not all that the game has to offer. So it won't change what number I'm going to give because I have to base it on the experience that I had. And this sort of game, which is normally not my thing, but may become it down the line. I'm going to give a 7.2 if I haven't used that already.
All right, 7.2. You are in the clear with Balatro. There you go. That leaves me here, and I joked about giving it a low score. I think I'm probably going to give it the lowest score in this group, but I can't in good conscience give it too low of a score just because I didn't see it. Both didn't grab a hold of me, but also I think it's a good chance I literally didn't see it. I'm here. Everything I hear about this should be a game that I love and attaches to me. Maybe didn't get enough time with it. Maybe it just took longer to click than Vampire Survivors, which, to be honest, is probably why I'm going to give Vampire Survivors the advantage between these two, because the fact that it clicked sooner, I think, is something to take into consideration in a way that this took a little longer. Maybe it was a little more hidden under the surface. Sometimes that's a good thing. In this case, I'm not sure it worked in this advantage. You know what? I'm going to take after some very other famous scores we've all enjoyed at the past. I don't think I've done this yet. I'm going to give it a 6.942. And we'll just, the zero is implied, even though it's a decimal.
Yes.
Because look, it's not at this. We are in a point in the podcast now where we get to be picky. Even really good games, we're probably going to sound more negative on, by nature of how this podcast works. Because of that, it's like this is still, and I recognize it, even if it didn't sink into me, this is still a good game. It's only when talking about it, honestly, if we were actually doing this game in a vacuum and I didn't have Vampire Survivors, I think I would have liked this game a lot more.
That's fair.
think it's because I was playing, it wasn't in a vacuum, and I was playing both at the same time, that I'm almost maybe sound a little more sour on this than I intend to be. But we're giving it that 6.942. We can all giggle about it later. But I do have that available to me. Let's pop into the second game of discussion. And Tro, I'm going to start with you on this one. Vampire Survivors.
It's funny because when called upon to judge this game and give it kind of a numerical score, I feel like it's not reflective of the amount of time I spent with it. Because I really played this game a lot. So I really can't pretend that I disliked it that much. But I also...
You make it sound like smoking cigarettes or something. Like
it
was
kind
more
of
an
feels
addiction.
like that.
I think it's
To
closer
be
to
honest.
heroin, but go on.
Well, I haven't done that, so I can only compare it to something I've done. And like...
All right, well, Louis, it's
And-
like
and-
heroin, right? Like, no.
Yes.
Yeah. Can confirm.
But it is like that too, because like I haven't smoked cigarettes in a while, but like if I were in the right state of mind, i.e. kind of drunk and in the right environment, I would want a cigarette. And the same kind of thing can sort of apply. And like, honestly, when we were playing it for this podcast, my reaction to delving into Vampire Survivors again kind of felt like someone who didn't want to fall off the wagon, where I just, not to trivialize someone's like real struggles there, but it was
No, of
truly
course, of
like
course.
I didn't want to play it again that much. I only played a little bit to like remind myself of the game. And then I said, I know enough about this game from all the hours I put in before to do it. I'm not letting myself get drawn in again, because it was just a relationship to a game that didn't always feel healthy. All of that is to say is I'm going to give it a number, which is going to be 6.54321.
6 point. Yep, you have it available.
Oh yeah, I didn't do that one yet.
No, not yet, not yet. All right, Louis, Vampire Survivors.
Yeah, I mean, Petro, I think, really nailed a lot of the sort of like abstract parts and concerns about like what this is the game. I do think it's interesting, maybe a bit of like a watershed moment in terms of like what gaming can look like and do and how we approach it, like, and it's not just necessarily a singular activity, you know, like in a particular way. So I'm going to go slightly higher with it. I do think, though, it deserves a ridiculous score for also being a ridiculous game, and I think it's exceptionally solid. So I would like to give it a 7.00000001.
7 point. I want to make sure I get this right. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. I believe that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros.
Okay, great.
Is that right?
That feels good. Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got it correctly. I don't want to be blasted later for getting it wrong.
That is what's in my heart.
Okay.
That's
good.
7. Yeah.
What's nice about that puts it exactly 0.0000001 above what you gave Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So
I mean, and that's like, honestly, like that's very fair. Also another game that I think is exceptionally solid, but like I don't have like the most fun with. So like good games. They're both good games. Good games, beautiful games.
Good, beautiful, demure games. I'll go next on this one because I think it's unfair if I put myself last every time. I got re-addicted to this. I did fall off the wagon. I got re-addicted to this game. Hook it to my goddamn veins. I had so much fun. That being said, I came in thinking at the beginning of this podcast I was probably going to rate it in the 9 somewhere. However, as we talked about it, you know, a lot of the points made had me reevaluate it kind of on the spot. And the truth is I think that is the addiction talking to this game more than anything else. It is. Again, I talked about at the very beginning. It's a dopamine hit, which can be in and of itself addicting as, say, scrolling through TikTok. And there's a very big similarity between the two. This is more fun than scrolling through TikTok. But like, is TikTok fun or does it just feel good? And I think there's something to that here too. So I'm going to rate it high. I'm probably going to rate it the highest out of a lot of us. But like in the end, I'm really docking it down maybe an entire full point, which in the scheme of things now with decimals is kind of a bigger deal than I would have otherwise. I'm going to give it I was going to make it 8675309, but I don't want to do an 8.7. So I'm going to do it 8.0675309.
Great.
All right.
Which I don't believe I've given anything yet.
I would be really surprised if you had.
It's like not even the joke. Like,
in your heart of hearts, you just felt that was the right score for.
Fuck! I gave it to God of War. No kidding. Patrick, let's go to you. What do you think?
What I'm docking it for in addiction, I will add back in its sense of like playfulness and fun and, discovery. And like, it's clear that this person like hid a lot of like interesting little things, and like the maps are like weird. I don't know if you guys read through the bestiary any, but like reading the descriptions of the monsters is like just so, it shows a sweetness and a like sense of love in the game that like I feel like really like helps enrich the entire experience. And yeah, it's similar to the Gros Michel banana, like some of the references that the weapons or characters make. It's funny. Like it's definitely a very good and like well thought out game in that sense. Some of them are very Italian references that I didn't get until I Googled them, to be fair. So yeah, I think it's very good. I was going to give it a 7.77 in recognition of slot machines and, a jackpot. But if you remember, I said I would dock at 0.01 because of having flying Medusa heads. So I'm going to give it a 7.76.
7.76. All right.
As long as I haven't used that.
And that's what we call a real payoff to the beginning of this.
You knew the whole time?
Hell yeah.
I said I'd do it, and I did it.
I like how your answer was 7.78.
No, I'm docking. I'm docking.
But yeah, and then you could dock.
Docking. No.
Yeah, you could have, yes.
No,
It was
no,
on the jackpot
this-
and it clicked one more.
Alright.
Yeah, this is the pure honest game. Plus, Patrick would never get a natural jackpot. That involves luck. We discussed on a text thread earlier today. That doesn't work that way. All right, guys.
Oh, yeah.
With the scores locked in, this is where the two games land. Starting in the number 15 spot, right above WarioWare Mega Party Games. Shocking how far that's dropped down from the beginning of this podcast. And underneath Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is Vampire Survivors with a 7.3426855475. Working our way up to what I believe is the number 6 spot on the list, right above Louis' favorite TMNT Turtles in Time, and underneath Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past is Balatro with a 7.9855. Guys, based on where these two have landed, does anyone want to change their score? You can change one score you've made this episode once. That is it. It is locked in forever after that. How are we feeling about where these games have landed?
I want to change Balatro. One, I absolutely want to have Balatro be above TMNT because I think it is a significantly better designed game.
Well, it is. It is currently above. It is currently above.
Yeah.
And it's above TMNT and below A Link to the Past.
That's fine. Legend of Zelda is never going to be my cup of tea, but okay, I see where we're coming from with that.
Is Legend of Zelda Link to the Past a solid 8?
A solid 8.
Did all 4 or however many people you had on that episode rate it an 8?
It was a 4-person episode. I think everyone else was a new guest, so they did have solid numbers to work with, but they didn't all give it an 8.
Gotcha. That's wild.
The math just crazily worked out that way.
Nice. Yeah, I feel good about my scores, and I feel good about where they fell. I don't know if Lou's going to have a type of feeling about WarioWare, but
yeah, I'm not going to mess with mine. I do feel a little bad that I'm only thinking of the negative addictive elements of Vampire Survivors in my rating, or I'm weighing them so strongly because I really don't think that was there was so much good intention behind how that game was made, as Patrick pointed out, but I also just have to think of how the game affected me in my experience of it. So I'm leaving it where it is.
I think I actually, you know what, I was going to be chilling okay with this. I think I need to drop down Balatro. I hear, Louis, how you feel about TMNT Turtles in Time. Where that is just where that is. But am I honestly going to say that Balatro is a better game than both Final Fantasy VI or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe?
I think so.
I can see the argument for 6. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but 8 Deluxe, or even sitting here GoldenEye, a game that I wasn't crazy about. Do we really think Balatro is a better game?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say that. Yeah, there's not some of this is the games that have made the list somehow. There aren't too many games right now on this list that I would have a hard time saying I think Balatro is a worse made game than they are.
Interesting.
I think in platonic ideals, Balatro game is pretty high up there.
Yeah. But that said, I'm not the one here advocating to change its number.
But none of us have changed our numbers yet, Noah, so how do you want to do this?
I mean, I could go far lower than you guys can go higher, first off.
That's fair.
I mean, also, are we allowed to wheel and trade in other ways? Can I promise I won't change my Balatro score higher if I'm allowed to lower TMNT?
Really start everything's just going to lose all meaning at this point.
I'll like sacrifice ever giving a game a 10 if I can drop Turtles in Time. By like at least a solid point.
Is Turtles in Time your primary sticking point as far as this list? I know you felt bad about a lot of the Turtles games.
I mean,
I
I
think
think
more
they were
egregious than the
all
others?
rated way too high. And I would also say the difference between Turtles in Time and I don't know, any of the other ones that are on there, I think there's a real Double Dash 8 Deluxe argument to me with Turtles in Time and like Shredder's Revenge at like this point in time. But like they're all a little too high. None of them were designed like all that. They're fine games.
There's a much lower ceiling on the type of games those are.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Sure. Right.
Tro, let me pose it to you. With Balatro, I know as a fellow JRPG fan, and I know one who was also not very happy with where 6 and Chrono Trigger landed initially when you first discovered that episode. Like, do you stand by this number?
No, but I no longer feel anything. So
You've had all of your dopamine receptors
all
burned out.
my
by
joy, all my joy died when I saw where Chrono Trigger was on the list. It's not worth fighting because I think it will just cause whatever tenuous grasp on reality this list has to completely lose all meaning. So I'm just letting it ride.
Well, God, see, I was going to be like, yeah, all right, you guys made a fair enough argument, but Tro's defeatist attitude has really turned me back around to wanting a fighting chance. Because if we don't fight for what we believe in, who will, right? So what did I give Balatro? Knowing that Pat has already threatened some level of shenanigans here. I have given Balatro, that's on Patrick's list. I'm not doing Patrick's list. I want my list. I gave Balatro, I already forgotten, a 6.942.
It's crazy that you're going to change your Patrick ass score.
Yeah, you're fucking tough. You want to do what I did to God of War and change it to a 4.2069, which is the better comedy number, an argument I made about God of War however many months ago.
Honestly, Patrick, that was the exact joke I was going to make and do that. So yes, I am going to go ahead and give that a 4.20.
I will still say the same thing again, that changing a score from an almost 7 to a barely 4 is...
Listen, God of War can suck a dick for all those quick time events.
No, but granted, I'm doing this with the context now of knowing I could change this to knock it down a peg, not because it's necessarily the score I initially wanted to give it. Pat made that change before he locked in his score simply because he found out one was funnier than the other and nothing more.
Stand by it. Stand by your man.
Oh, good. I didn't give it that number either, so we're safe. Going that knocks Balatro down just a little below Vampire Survivors.
What?
With a 7.
That's crazy.
No, that's too crazy.
With a 7.301725.
I'm bumping up Balatro to 9.99. Fuck it. I'm giving it the second highest thing.
At 9.99?
Yeah.
Let's go. All right. You move from a 9.6 to a 9.99.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not that much of a jump.
Pat, I wasn't looking right. Pat already walked away in anger. It's a great start. Okay, you know what? That puts Balatro above Vampire Survivors, above Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and below Patrick's favorite game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Okay.
With a 7.399225. Gentlemen?
I can live with it there. I don't love it. I liked it being in the top, but I'm glad that it's rated higher than Ocarina of Time. So I'm good.
Where did it
Tro, how about you? Someone who is dead on the inside. Has this given you a new lease on life, or have you fully given up?
I'm not calling it giving up. I'm calling it acceptance.
Well, with that, and canonically recognizing that Castlevania Symphony Night is still a better game than Balatro, we can put that to a close right there. Guys, thank you so much, as always, for being on the podcast. I know you all feel so good about it right now. Where can people find you online?
You gonna call somebody out first, or?
No, I let you guys jump in.
All right. I'm at Patrick BC Malloy on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm PBCM on Blue Sky. That's where you can find me.
Beautiful.
As always, you can find me at Naked Pictures of Louis Thomas on Instagram, Drunky Looster on Twitter, iCarly on Neopets. But this, I think it's IEYE and then space car space Lee LE.
Oh wait, legitimately, that's not even a joke.
Yeah, no.
I knew it wasn't.
No, I'm there. I'm there. Y'all can find me up. Talk to.
That's
my
where you do
Lennies.
most of your discourses on Neopets.
Yeah, I get all of my politics from Neopet.
Jesus.
Probably still has to be better than Twitter these days.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, man. I don't do any of this stuff. I'm still just lurking on Reddit. Desperate Bedroom 24. Come find me. Maybe I'll throw some other social network into the mix at some point, but I'm not feeling it yet.
Not yet. He's not there yet. He's still got to work his way through the rest of this list. You know, it feels very rare that I feel like I get to have my way on this show. I'm sure everyone feels that way when on the show, but I feel like I think I might be more okay with some of the dumb shit that happens on the list here than a lot of people. But this felt good. Knocking it down to where I felt like it made sense to me felt good. I think not to, and again, that's not to say Balatro is a bad game, but I think to me it makes more sense where it falls on the list now. But that's just me. And you know what? I'd love to get your thoughts. If you can, leave a comment on the video or a review on whatever podcast platform you desire, and let me know why we're wrong. I would love to see that, as well as a 5-star, a 2-star, a 3.5 star, whatever you feel deems necessary, because that helps us out. Even if you disagree, you know, some engagement is better than no engagement. So talk to me. Let's get the conversation started. Another way to get the conversation started, guys, is the Discord. It is live. It is ready. It is raring to go at the Kaiju Lounge. Check us out on Discord. I'll make sure to leave a link in all the various things below so you can hop in and join the party. We talk about the best game of all time and our various reviews on that. We talk about the world's greatest gamer. You can add game suggestions or find out what the next one is. Room to talk about all things: comics, video games, anime, pro wrestling, whatever little nerdy pocket you are into, we have it on there. So if you are a fan of this podcast and you want to be part of the community, you want entrance past the velvet ropes into the Kaiju Lounge, our Discord is the way to go. Otherwise, you can always go ahead and follow me. I am at Boss Monster Kaiju everywhere but X/Twitter/ whatever Elon decides to call it next. It is Boss Monster with an A Kaiju, not Boss Monster with an ER Kaiju. Be sure to give me a follow so you don't miss other updates, other things. It's also the best place to reach me. If you have something you're trying to promote and want to pop on, let's go. Let's do it. Let's bring the community together. Let's all come together. Let's make this a place where we can speak our minds, talk our truths, and get down, rolling in the nerdy shit we all know and love. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. As always, tune in for the next episode. I haven't done one of these in a while. Normally, I just let it surprise. But next episode, we've got a doozy. If you want to jump into the fun and jump in the conversation now, I would say you would need to start playing Disco Elysium, because that is the game, the sole game we are playing for the next episode of the best game of all time. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay cool, stay hip, stay heavy.
The Best Game of All Time is an independent production hosted, produced, and edited by Noah Waterman. Theme music by Peter Rowland. If you want to learn more, go visit www.thekaijulounge.com.